Compliance Solutions, Zeffert & Associates, Inc. welcomes you to the online version of the course Managing HUD Compliance, Identifying Eligible Residents. This is Module A. My name is Scott Michael Dunn, Vice President and Chief Compliance Officer. As always, joining me for this module is our Senior Trainer Extraordinaire, Joseph Henry.
Hello. The purpose of this training is to provide information for all interested personnel to successfully provide housing under HUD Affordable Housing Programs covered by the HUD Handbook 4350.3.
As for references to the text of the chapters of the handbook index tells us that paragraph references are presented in bold. Page number references appear in standard typeface without bold. On your screen you see the example reference, bold 5-7A, standard typeface 5-21. This reference will lead you to paragraph 5-7 and part A of that paragraph, which is on page 5-21. The first number in both paragraph and page references, in this case the number 5, is the chapter number. You can see the beginning of that paragraph on the screen below the reference.
Other than general references to the text of the handbook, there are a couple of other types of references we can spend a minute demonstrating, like exhibits. These are also referenced in a chapter-exhibit number format. The exhibits used to have page numbers that continued after the chapter. However, with Change 3, HUD stopped including page numbers for most exhibits. Some still have page numbers, but they are just for the pages in the exhibit, not continuing from the chapter. For example, you may want to check out the part of the first exhibit of Chapter 5 that lists income inclusions and exclusions. It is referenced as you see here. 5-1 tells us that it's the first exhibit of Chapter 5. This exhibit is one of those that have page numbers, so page 1 is where we will find what we need. Again, you can see part of that page on your screen. Finally, let's see an appendix reference. As we come to the section of the course on verifying data, we will see references to Appendix 3. How to verify unborn children is found on page 14 of this appendix. So we will see this reference referring to Appendix 3, page 14, which looks like this.
Well, now we know most of what we need to know to find anything we need in the handbook. Let's just cover a few format features that each chapter has. Each begins with an introduction that is paragraph 1 of the chapter. Paragraph 2 provides key terms that a person must understand as they read the chapter. If any of these key terms are not familiar to a person, they can go to the glossary to familiarize themselves with these key terms and concepts. Finally, most chapters are broken up into sections. Each section begins with a paragraph that cites key regulations which are the basis for the chapter's content. That is probably enough background for purposes of this course. Of course, our participants can always read Chapter 1 of the handbook if they want a bit more information. At this point, let's stop for a brief quiz to give our participants a chance to put a few of the things that we have learned so far into practice.
You are right that most Section 8 managers in this universe are primarily concerned with the 50% very low income limits. Scott Michael, you often tell classes that you teach that you're a science fiction geek, or a nerd, or sometimes I even call you a dweeb. You probably get a kick out of the question, what universe are you in?
Is there more than one universe? I mean, outside of novels and TV?
Well, in the Section 8 world, there are time frames referred to as universes. The dividing date between these universes is October 1st, 1981, incidentally, when I graduated from high school, and we refer to pre- and post-universe properties. For pre-1981 universe properties, limits can be up to 80% of the AMI.
Let me see. If I remember what we just discussed correctly, that's the low limit.
Exactly. For post-universe projects, the limit can be up to the 50% AMI with a certain percentage at the 30%.
Or the extremely low limits. Got it. Now that we understand the different income limit types, our participants need to know which income limit to apply to the specific program that they work with. Figure 3-3, found on page 3-8 in the HUD Handbook, helps with this. We have also reproduced this in the course manual. If you need to, take a moment to pause this presentation and determine which limits apply to your property or properties. So, temporarily absent household members are counted. But what about cases of persons who will not be returning because they are permanently confined to a hospital or nursing home?
Well, in that case, Scott Michael, the household decides if they want to count the absent individual. If they choose to include them, these persons count toward the number of persons for the income limits, and all of their income is included. If they choose not to include them, the person does not count toward the income limits, and their income is excluded. The absent member cannot be listed as the head, the co-head, or spouse.
So a household member could make this decision based on emotional or value-based criteria, or for practical reasons. For instance, one person may insist that their spouse be included in their household even if that means that they do not qualify because they feel strongly that this is the right thing to do. Another person may feel that whether the spouse is counted or not is simply a matter of paperwork detail, that it doesn't change their relationship with their loved one. They may be more concerned with making a choice that allows them an affordable place to live. Either way, a manager's job is simply to inform them of their choices and the consequences of each, and then let them decide.
You know, another special rule applies to persons who are on active military duty, and so are not in the unit. If these persons are the head, co-head, or spouse of the head, we must count them even though they are out of the unit. If they are not the head, co-head, or spouse of the head, household members in the military who have a spouse or a child in the unit must be counted, even if they are assigned out of town.
While this is generally true, Change 3 of the HUD Handbook encourages reasonable leniency when it comes to those absent in the military. Although it is not explicitly stated in the text of the handbook, this leniency seems to revolve around when minor dependents are involved. For example, an owner might conclude that a military member and their children are not household members when grandparents are temporarily caring for their grandchildren while the parent is on active duty, even though, strictly speaking, the military member's dependents are in the unit and therefore both the dependents and the parent should be counted. Also, an owner might choose not to count the income of a guardian that is temporarily in the unit to care for children of a person on active duty. Now, in this case, of course, the military member and the children would be counted. It just may be established that the guardian is a member that would not be counted.
Now that we've discussed members who are absent who we count, we need to discuss persons that may be living in a unit but who will be excluded as family members. Again, this means that they will not be added to the number of members when selecting income limits. Live-in aides for the elderly or disabled are not family members.
Does just anyone qualify to have a live-in aide?
Absolutely not. An aide is defined as a person who resides with one or more elderly persons, nearly elderly persons, or persons with disabilities, and who is determined to be essential to the care and well-being of the persons. They're not obligated for the support of the persons, and they wouldn't be living in the unit except to provide the necessary supportive services. The last item is especially important. While HUD tells us that a live-in aide may be a relative, such as an adult child that lives in a unit to care for their parent, it is important to note that the aide is not on the lease and will have to leave the unit if the tenant does. The glossary of the handbook further tells us that a live-in aide may never be a dependent.
Again, with Change 3, HUD has clarified that owners must verify the need for a live-in aide through a physician, psychiatrist, or other medical practitioner or healthcare provider. Further verification requirements in this regard are listed in the new paragraph 3-6E3-2. 2.
Finally, also excluded as family members for income limit purposes are foster children and adults and guests. Although we do not use foster children and adults to determine how many people reside in the unit for income limit purposes, we do now count their income. Wow, there are certainly some details to keep straight when it comes to who to count as family members. Some households will certainly be more complex than others. Let's take a moment for a scenario workshop. You can read it in your course manual and fill in the correct answer in your book and see if you're right on the screen.
Moving right along in our discussion of program eligibility requirements, we come to the primary residence rule. HUD says assisted tenants must have only one residence and receive assistance only in that unit. This rule is meant to ensure that the government pays assistance on only one unit for a family. Double subsidy is prohibited. Persons who hold a voucher cannot keep their vouchers and get project-based assistance at the same time.
To be program eligible, a household also must sign specific consent and verification forms. All adult household members must sign the consent forms HUD 9887 and 9887A. Admission or continued assistance must be denied for failure to sign these at move-in and every annual recertification.
Congratulations on passing Module A of the course Managing HUD Compliance, Identifying Eligible Residents. When you close this training session window, press close or exit only once. Be sure to allow it time to close. It may take several seconds. Do not press close again or your final score may not be recorded by the online learning system. Don't forget to go to the transcript page of your personalized learning page to download or print your certificate of completion. If you took this module on its own, we invite you to look at our growing list of training sessions available in the course catalog section of your personalized learning page. If you are taking this as part of the Managing HUD Compliance Identifying Eligible Residents course, we will see you again for Module B, where we will discuss Chapter 4 of the HUD Handbook, which deals with application processing and the waiting list.